All right, hello, welcome back. So in this video, we are going to cover Microsoft Windows Server licensing. It can get a little complex, so let's get started. So it's an operating system that Microsoft specifically created for use on a server. It's actually designed to run continually in the background and provide resources to other networked computers. Windows Server is only designed to be used in business settings, however. Now, since Windows Server 2016, Windows Server has had the option of being installed with or without the desktop GUI. The installation without the GUI is called Server Core, and it's primarily managed using the command line. However, the desktop installation option for Windows Server is far more popular. The desktop actually looks much like Windows 10. It's got a taskbar, desktop icons, a start button. Windows Server, though, is designed to run enterprise-level workloads. So here's a few roles that a Windows Server system can perform: AD, DNS, DHCP, file and print services, web server, failover cluster, Hyper-V virtualization, Exchange server, SQL server. And sure enough, there are three basic editions of Windows Server 2022. Windows Server 2022 Data Center. Now, this is designed for highly virtualized data centers and cloud environments. Windows Server 2022 Standard, designed primarily for physical or minimally virtualized environments. And then we've got Windows Server 2022 Essentials. Now, this is intended for small businesses with up to 25 users and about 50 devices. Now, all editions of Windows Server 2022 can be managed using Server Manager or Windows Admin Center, WAC. You can also take advantage of the hybrid capabilities for management by using Azure Arc to manage your local premises Windows Server 2022 systems, along with your Azure-based virtual machines, VMs. So installation of the new version of Windows Server 2022 can be performed as an in-place upgrade for Windows Server 2016 and higher, or you can perform a new standalone installation. Now, what do you suppose are some of the benefits of knowing your licensing? Well, being an enterprise-level software platform, Windows Server 2022 can be expensive, right? Understanding the licensing requirements for Windows Server 2022 will enable you to optimize your investment in the platform. So this enables you to ensure that you only purchase the services that you need, and you don't make any unnecessary investments in Windows Server editions, features, and services that you're really not going to use. So understanding the licensing also helps to ensure that you stay in compliance with the licensing rules and restrictions. So what do you think? Has Windows Server licensing changed over the years? Well, we'll start way back with Windows Server 2008, and prior, Windows Server was primarily licensed using a Server Plus Client Access license, CAL model, or a Processor Plus CAL model. Windows Server Standard and Enterprise editions were licensed using the Server Plus CAL model. And Windows Server Data Center and Windows Server for Titanium-based system editions were only licensed using the Processor Plus CAL model. However, since the release of Windows Server 2016, Microsoft has switched to licensing Windows Server according to the number of processor cores. Now, not surprisingly, the new licensing model is a bit more complex than the older licensing scheme. With Windows Server 2022, Windows Server 2022 Standard, and Windows Server 2022 Data Center, they all follow a core-based licensing model, while Windows Server 2022 Essentials uses a server-based licensing model. So let's go over a few of the core-based licensing rules that you really ought to know. Each Windows Server Data Center and Standard Edition server requires a minimum of single-base license, which covers 16 core licenses. If you upgrade your system by purchasing additional CPUs or cores, then you must also purchase additional licenses to cover those upgrades. All physical cores of the server must be licensed. Additional licenses are required if you install the OS on systems with more than 16 cores. Additional core licenses can easily be purchased in packs of 2, 4, and 16 cores. Additional core licenses are also required for customers who wish to license more than the 2 virtual machines that are covered by the Windows Server 2022 Standard Edition license. Now here again, if you need additional core licenses, you'll need to purchase them in packs of 2, 4, or 16 core. Windows Server 2022 Standard and Windows Server 2022 Data Center also require client access licenses for every user or device that connects to the server. All right, now that we understand that, it's important to understand that a client access license is not a software product. See, a CAL is a license that gives a user or device the right to access Windows Server system services, like file shares or printing. With a device CAL, you purchase a CAL for a given device that accesses your server independent of the number of users who use that device, right? So this is intended for scenarios where multiple users might use a single licensed device. Some common examples might include a public terminal in a store that's accessed by different customers, or a device in a manufacturing facility where multiple employees need to use the same system. So what about the difference between a user and a device, CAL? Well, just as their names might imply, or you could infer from that, a user CAL applies to an end user, while a device CAL applies to a specific device. So user licenses are applicable if the user needs to access the server and could potentially use multiple devices, like a desktop and a laptop or whatever. Device licenses would be more applicable for public use or shared device usage, as you only need to license the device, no matter who's using it. User licensing would be, though, the most common option. So Windows Server licenses can be purchased from a variety of different sources. In fact, most businesses have volume purchase agreements that they've made with Microsoft. And these agreements are typically tailored for the business's specific requirements, and they usually offer a discount for the purchase of licenses for Windows Server and other Microsoft products. Now, in addition to channel partners, you can also buy Windows Server 2022 directly from the Microsoft Store. The Server OS can also be obtained from server hardware OEM partners like HP, Dell, Lenovo, and others. Let's check out the Microsoft list prices for Windows Server 2022. You see them right there on the screen. Windows Server 2022 Data Center is obviously the Data Center edition. This uses core-based licensing and requires CALs. That's $6,155. It's the list price, though. Server 2022 Standard. Yeah, the Standard Edition uses core-based licensing and requires CAL, and it comes in at an even $1,069. And Windows Server 2022 Essentials uses a per-server license, and no CALs are required. And that's an easily affordable $501. And again, these are the list prices. Now, what can actually be virtualized? Well, Windows Server 2022 includes the Hyper-V feature, and this is Microsoft's virtualization platform. Hyper-V provides hardware virtualization that enables you to install various operating systems on that virtual hardware. Hyper-V supports running all sorts of different types of virtual machines, including Windows Server, Windows 10 or 11, Linux, as well as Mac OS. However, the virtualization licensing rights for the 3 Windows Server editions are completely different. Windows Server 2022 Data Center is intended for highly virtualized environments. It includes rights to unlimited virtual machines, or as they are termed in the licensing documentation, operating system environments, OSEs, and containers. So in other words, you can run as many VMs or OSEs and containers on Windows Server 2022 Data Center Edition as you want, and you'll not actually need to pay for any additional Windows Server licenses. Windows Server 2022 Standard is intended for lightly virtualized environments, so it includes rights for 2 virtual machines and unlimited containers. If you want to run any additional VMs, then you'll need to purchase additional licenses. Windows Server 2022 Essentials is primarily intended for small businesses or small to medium-sized businesses, SMBs, with an emphasis on ease of use and Azure cloud integration. Windows Server 2022 Essential allows you to run one VM, which can run only Windows Server Essentials. Okay? So if you run the VM, then the physical host can only be used to manage the VM. Okay. The Windows Server 2022 Data Center and Standard Editions will also provide support for running containers, and you can run an unlimited number of containers on those 2 editions. So what do you think? Will there be a Hyper-V Server 2022? Well, no. Sorry if I disappoint you. See, in the past, Microsoft released a special limited edition of Windows Server that was explicitly designed for virtualization support called Hyper-V Server. Microsoft released Hyper-V Server 2016 and Hyper-V Server 2019. Hyper-V Server was essentially a free product, but you were still required to license any VMs it ran on. Hyper-V Server was not widely adopted, and Microsoft discontinued it with Windows Server 2022. So what is software assurance, or SA? Well, software assurance is a feature, and you can add on to your Windows Server licenses that provides additional benefits beyond the basic licensing. SA can also be purchased for OEM licensed software within 90 days after purchase. The most important benefit of SA is new product version rights, which entitles you to a new version of the software when it becomes available at no additional cost. SA also has a few other benefits, as well as including extended hotfix support and enhanced OSE mobility, where you can freely move Windows VMs between different hosts. Well, guess what? We got to wrap it up. So that's all about Microsoft Windows Server licensing. I'm sure you learned a bunch, but check out the next video because we're not done yet. See you then.